Hi, everybody. Welcome to another session of the Future Tech podcast series. It's me, Charlie Sell, the Group MD of Arrows, where I'm interviewing CTOs, CIOs, thought leaders within the tech world, wanting to know a bit about their story and emerging technology, things that are really topical right now when it comes to regarding technology, and career advice to our STEM graduates. So great pleasure to have Richard Harding with me today. Richard is the global CTO of Haymarket Publishing Group, a global media specialist media company based in Teddington, but with a global outreach. So welcome to the show, Richard.
Oh, welcome there. Thank you very much. How are you?
Yeah, very good today. We were just talking that we're both from Winchester, born and bred, weren't we? So
yeah, exactly. We're just reminiscing. Talking about a few things. Yeah, absolutely.
And so let's jump straight in and ask you a bit about your background.
Okay, yeah, sure. So I've got a degree in systems analysis, and what I did was back in the late 90s, I joined NatWest Bank up here, NatWest Corporate actually, up in London. And that was pre-Millennium Bug. And for those who don't know, this was this incredible thing that had occurred where those that were building systems back in the 60s and 70s hadn't really thought too far ahead and decided to just use a couple of digits when it came to the year. So instead of putting 1973, they just put 73 or 74. So they'd only use a couple of digits. But so there's this whole thing called the Millennium Bug that was going around where every system had to be upgraded and fully tested. And this seemed to last for something like 2 to 3 years just before the millennium. And the big fear was that planes were going to drop from the sky, cash machines were going to spit out cash if we didn't get all this testing and everything done. Now, actually, as it turned out, it almost felt like the biggest non-event ever known to mankind because nothing of any real significance really happened. But I joined NatWest Bank. I did a lot of work on these sort of things, upgrading systems, doing testing and everything. But I actually think that the long-term legacy of that was a bit of a distrust from the business of IT for quite a few years afterwards, because it had tied up so much time and resources and money to working on these projects. But anyway, I worked for them. It was a great job, really, really interesting. But RBS came along and actually bought NatWest out. And I was working on the more next-gen, newer systems, working actually in Java back then, which was a new programming language, which was really exciting. But RBS came in and there was lots of structural changes going on. And chances were I was going to start to have to write COBOL or something like that. So I was going to be sort of moved off to a mainframe team. And that wasn't for me. So I decided to move at that point. And actually, I ended up joining a startup called lastminute.com. And I was interviewed by the founders, Brent and Martha, and I was employee number 45, so really early on, and it was fantastic. It was such a great journey, working really closely with the founders, and I actually stayed there for 5 years, right up until they sold the business. And they grew it through that time, both organically and through acquisition, up to 2,500 people. So it was a huge growth journey. And I look back on that time really, really fondly. It was a great team. And a lot of the people I was working with, the technologists, have gone on and had some, brilliant careers as well. And really, really interesting stuff that they've done. But it dawned on me that actually the real ethos there was no fear of failure. We were trying stuff all the time. And some of those things were working out and some of them weren't. But it was just normal to work like that. And that was a massive change from working from the big corporate banks that I'd done up to that point. So that was really good fun. And at that point, I went and joined AOL, actually. I became their dev manager here in the UK. Now, AOL back then was an access business and also a big portal business with lots of content. They were actually owned by Time Warner back then as well. So it was a huge, huge US business. But the bit I was working in was about basically connecting people to the internet. It used to have dial-up modems. Do you remember that fantastic time when you used to try dial-up and you get that lovely squeaky noise? We were just transitioning through to something a little bit quicker and broadband at that time. And I was working here for a couple of years, and actually again, and this happens to me a few times throughout my career. We were hugely into agile, and that was really exciting, and we were really pushing the boundaries of how to work. But ultimately, they looked to sell the business. AOL was going through a restructuring, and actually sold the access business to Carphone Warehouse. And I felt, again, that feels like about time for me to leave. And so I transitioned from a developer through to sort of project manager, tech leader, dev manager. And then I joined ITV Online here in the UK. I was very fortunate, great time to join a business going through a huge transition. So brilliant, broadcaster, very used to putting out massive shows, but actually transitioning that to an online space. And so I was in charge of the teams that were built the very first ITV player. And that was a really exciting time wrestling through. I mean, today we take it for granted how you can do transcoding, encoding, all of this in Amazon Web Services, how you can move big files around, how you can play video back with security in it, all the rest of it. We had to build all that from scratch. It didn't exist. So, it was really fun, interesting times. And actually, thinking about it, back then the BBC was going with the download model because they didn't think the internet was, could take was going to be quick enough. We banked everything on the by the time we built the products and services, streaming would be good enough. And luckily we were right. So that saved us an awful lot of, transitioning and pivoting that would have gone on. So we did that, we built that. And again, I always seem to stay for about 5 years. That seems to be, a thing. And I think that's a good benchmark actually for getting in somewhere, making a difference, seeing it through, not leaving too early that you can't see that, and actually make some changes because you're going to need to do that. And then look to see what next. And for me, I'd done that, and I was thinking, right, what do I do next? And I wanted to take the working with entrepreneurial stuff, but also working with the big corporate guys, and actually set up my own consultancy. So back then, with nothing more than heady optimism, I decided to tell everybody I knew that what I was going to do was set up my own consultancy, and I'm going to work with some large businesses, and I'm going to work with some entrepreneurial startup founder type people. Well, within 6 weeks, I was very fortunate. I'd landed a big client, albeit initially for 6 weeks, and that was Heathrow Airport. They wanted me to come in and look over their digital strategy and help them do some small pieces. Now, so I actually joined Heathrow for 6 weeks and stayed for 6 years. So working sort of 3 to 4 days a week. That was fantastic. I mean, as a concept, it's incredible. An airport is a mini city. Yes, you've got the planes and you've got the passengers, but you've got high value shopping malls, you've got fire stations, you've got sewage works, you've got traffic lights, you've got police station, you've got all out of morgue, you've got everything you'd expect in a city. And I was fortunate enough to set up and help run first of all their innovation team, so helping them bring technology into solving some of those big challenges that you can get in cities. And then also through other things, helping them set up mobile apps, development teams, etc. But while I was doing that, I was also working with some founders, sitting on the board of smaller startups, helping them get their ideas off the ground, how bringing products and services to market in a business like Heathrow versus doing it in a very scratch startup. Very different processes, very different economies of scale in terms of, I guess, what they can achieve. And so I did that for a number of years. And then I was in one of those sort of sideline roles I was doing. I also set up a business called Technology Chiefs. It's an online website. It's really interesting for those who want to see what other CIOs, CTOs are currently thinking are their big issues, how they, what would they recommend doing to get on in their careers, etc. So I've run that for about 5 years now with a business partner, John Foster, and it's lovely. I just have a few great conversations throughout the year with some other CIOs and ask them what they're up to. We share knowledge. It's just a really fun opportunity to chat to senior IT leaders. And it just so happened that one of those I was talking to said, "Oh, I've just been asked to do a bit of work, but I can't. Have you got any time free?" And one thing led to another, and I started a small piece of work for a business called Haymarket Media. And over time, that sort of transition got a bit bigger. I'd been working for Heathrow for a number of years, coming up 6 years, and it felt the right time to take on another sort of more substantial global role. And I've been there for 3.5 years, and it's a fantastic business. Here in the UK, we've got some consumer brands like What Car and Autocar, which people will know, but it's a lot of business media brands. And in the US, in medical, they're doing some fantastic work around medical learning. And in Asia, we've got some financial brands which are, do a great job. And here in the UK, PR, marketing, Marcoms, that type of brand, business media brands like Campaign or PR Week. And it's just such a fascinating business. So really enjoying my time there. And yeah, sorry, that was a bit rambly, but there you go.
Well, no, that was fantastic, because I think for everyone listening to what I took from that is just that really important bit around 5 years, and I totally agree with you. Career progression is around adding value, seeing something through, and leaving a legacy, isn't it?
Yeah, that's
And
right. Yeah.
I think people talk a lot about millennials nowadays, that the average 10 years is 2 years within a company. And I personally feel it's just not enough to really maximize not just your own self-learning and your development, but actually what you can deliver for the company as well. And
Yes.
you're living proof, I think, that 5 year mark is saying you don't need to commit your life to a job anymore, and you shouldn't. But
No.
to have that significant piece that you can really get embedded and add a value and legacy. Brilliant.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think you need to move to get those experiences, but you want to, you want to think about your personal brand. You want to think about what you have been able to achieve, effect, impact, etc. And you want to make sure that that you've given yourself a fair chance, and the business a fair chance to do that. So yeah, I totally agree, Charlie.
Yeah, great. And so moving on, because we talked a little bit beforehand, thinking about topical, what's really happening in the tech market at the moment, and I think we both came to a nice conclusion that cyber has just been growing in importance, especially within media, let alone the wider communities. And so I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on how is cyber being impacted, and the practicalities of how you maybe are protecting yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many hot topics. There is. But I thought this one was quite an interesting one, because it's kind of it's less about what we're trying to do at Haymarket, but more about the wider place we are as a society at the moment. So our thinking was a little bit more along the lines of, look, everybody has now got used to, over the last year, because of lockdown and COVID, transitioning more and more of their lives onto digital. Now, as technologists, we're probably quite used to it, but you think about it now, banking, shopping, entertainment, everything is happening online. And that for us, like I say, might be a fairly, natural thing, but for our parents, for our grandparents, for everybody else, that might not be so natural. And so what we want to do in the wider business is to try and help people understand about personal security, cyber security, and that, ultimately we provide a high level of sophistication in terms of security around our laptops, our end user devices, etc. But ultimately, pretty much every fail that you'll read about in the press or you'll hear about has a human element, unfortunately, an unwitting human element normally, who has clicked on a link, who has unfortunately made some form of error. And we wanted to really help people understand the importance of strong passwords, two-factor authentication, using a password manager, not how to have some basic skills in spotting phishing emails, etc. So we've just launched a cyber awareness program at Haymarket for the wider group, for no more reason to just try and educate, because it's really important. And hopefully that people like ourselves and anybody listening to this can think about those family members who might not be so au fait with some of these basic concepts, because it's not easy. It really isn't, And so just helping people out on this, because unfortunately, cyber is on the, is obviously on the rise. And yeah, we can play a really good role in just helping with some basic education. So yeah, I think an important thing for us all to consider and look at.
Yeah, and again, I think that's a really good advice, because that's not just relevant to employees of Haymarket or even our STEM listeners. This is
No.
advice and guidance that as a population, it is the new form of theft, I guess, new form of fraud,
Yeah.
or the rising form of theft and fraud. So it's not just whether you're a shopkeeper or run your own clothes shop. Actually, it's cyber attacks are everywhere, and
Yeah,
not just
and
for
these
enterprise.
phishing emails, are just so prevalent, and I quite often find myself, chatting to people who they get that nugget of doubt. This doesn't feel quite right, but yet because they're not they're not in an office. They're not around other people to ask. There's just this draw to click on that link, and this is really dangerous times for that, and unfortunately the criminals know that, and it's such a faceless crime, which is really frustrating, and but it's really impactful. So yeah, a really important thing for us to really consider and think about,
Yeah, and I guess the other bit that dawned on me as well was traditionally these sort of cyber attacks or crimes, people would normally say, "Oh, it happened to my grandparents." The elderly, because they're not used to technology. But the reality is actually it's got so clever now. It's happening to even the most savvy people who sometimes let their guard down.
Yes, exactly right. And that's it. That's all they're looking for, really, is that moment when you're, I don't know, maybe the kids are screaming, the dog's barking or something, and you're not really giving it your full attention. And that's what they're just looking for, that one in a million, because they can spam everybody with these sort of things. And don't get me wrong, the likes of Microsoft, Google, and all the email clients, they're doing a great job of phishing or weeding an awful lot of this out, but it still gets through. It can be quite clever. The criminals are getting really quite clever now on how to be much more targeted. And of course, they've got AI as much as we've got AI. So they're using AI to become more sophisticated in their attacks and learning and inserting things that make it feel real enough. And of course, obviously, on the defense side, obviously, we use AI to try and weed this stuff out.
Yeah. And so as a business, thinking about cyber and you're in this global role with Haymarket, do you look at cyber as a function that you're going to grow internally, i.e. hire your own cyber professionals, SOC analysts, pen testers, or is it something that you feel is better left with the consultancies and it's something you should outsource?
Well, I think it's a bit of both, really, to be honest with you. We have an information security officer. We have people that are dedicated to looking at this, but I always feel who's likely to going to be more sophisticated? The likes of Amazon, or the likes of these consultants who've got thousands and thousands of these engineers, or yourself. Do you think you can learn it all? Probably not. No, I think is the case for me. So you got to be cognizant of that. So it is quite specialist. There's an awful lot you can do yourself, I think, as well. It doesn't have to be. You don't have to be. It doesn't have to be hugely expensive, because it can be. But the point is to do the right things, and it's an education, because, like I say, it usually comes down to a human individual, unfortunately, an unwitting person who does the wrong thing in the wrong moment.
Yeah. And again, I don't think we can get bored of repeating that message, because again, it's prevalent to not just us STEM listeners, but anyone who does have an online account of some form. So
absolutely.
Thinking then, moving on to our STEM listeners and the universities we've partnered with, we always like to try and give a couple of bits of career advice. And I know we were talking, you have 2 young boys who will one day be in a position going through university to think about it. So when thinking about the advice you would give, what are 1 or 2 nuggets you'd give to our graduates?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is I know they've just gone through education, but it's really important to stay curious, to really continue to want to learn and hone those skills. I remember when I left university, I thought, right, that's it, I've learned. Now it's time to go and use skills. How foolish I was.
Yeah.
But actually the case is, yes, you've got to do that, but but actually now it's another level of education in the workplace. And don't just think you're going to learn it all on the job. You need to continue to invest in yourself. You're the only person that's going to really look after yourself. So invest in your skills. And I don't mean constantly reading new books. I mean, listening to podcasts, reading some blogs. Just find some people that kind of interest you, and just stay reading to them and talking to people in like-minded people in the industry. It's not as hard as it sounds. It can actually be quite enjoyable. But what I've really noticed over the years, that those that have really, really progressed are those that seem to have stayed curious. So there's that. This next one is my absolute bedrock, and it's lucky for me. But personally, and I'm going to steal someone else's quote, but broadly speaking, this is the same thing I've always said: is that effort is worth 25 IQ points. Be a hard worker. Put that in. Really, really push yourself to try and get whatever it is done. And it really does count. It really does count. Hard work, good work ethic will get you a long, long way in this world. And then on the flip side, the two things, work ethic and robustness, right? You need to be robust. There will be ups and downs, yeah? But you only kind of lose when you stop, yeah? If you keep going, you're still winning, yeah? So if you put hard work and robustness together, you have an absolute recipe for success, I promise you. And I've seen this throughout my career with other people, and I tell my kids this, that they don't listen, obviously, because they're my kids. But ultimately, honestly, robustness and work ethic together and a bit of a curious mind, and you're going to be onto a winner, I promise you.
And again, I think that is really, really prevalent, and super relevant. I've been scribbling notes down because I think I'm going to coin, just like you've taken that expression, for me, curious, work ethic, and robustness. If you could summarize it into three sort of key attributes to be able to show a future employer, to deliver definitely to a future employer and actually live, you're going to do very well, aren't you?
Yes, you are. I my 25 years, you are. They're the people that ultimately succeed. I can promise you, they are.
Yeah.
And if you look at, if you read, read Richard Branson, or you read those, they've got those three things in abundance. Elon Musk. I'm quoting some really massive people, but actually, just normal people that succeed tend to have those three things, and that's what just try and hone those. Practice how you can do those skills.
Yeah. Richard, thank you. That is a great way of sort of finishing off this podcast, because hopefully that's the bit that's going to resonate to a lot of our listeners. And we know the market is tough right now for graduates, and getting a job and getting your foot in the door is tough. So hopefully these words of wisdom and go a long way. And there's a huge amount of empathy from all of us to the market at the moment.
Definitely. And just to give them confidence that in terms of STEM IT skills, there is pent up demand. I promise you, it's there in the market. We can never hire enough talented people, both locally and globally, to get work done in all the businesses I've ever worked in. So it will be there. It will come charging back, if it isn't already there at the moment.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you. So yeah, well, look, once more, thank you, Richard. It's been really good to have you on the show.
No, really enjoyed it. No, great talking to you, Charlie.
Great. And for all our listeners, so that's another episode of our Future Tech podcast series. As always, they are our landing page, www.arrowspodcast.com. It's linked to our partner universities, but it's also on our website and on our LinkedIn account. So you can find us both on video, but Spotify and Apple on the landing page. So for another show, thank you everybody, and speak again next week.
Thank you for listening to Future Tech with Charlie Sell, a podcast from Arrows Group Global. Please subscribe to this podcast so that you never miss an episode. Arrows Group is a global technology recruitment and workforce solutions provider who focus on people at the heart of all our interactions. With in-depth technology expertise and global candidate communities, we offer bespoke solutions to every client and candidate. To find out more, visit arrowsgroup.com.